Welcome to a gentle journey into one of history's great mysteries, the Sea Peoples. Over 3,000 years ago, these mysterious groups appeared from the sea, reshaping the Mediterranean before vanishing just as suddenly. Their origins remain unknown, and their story still echoes through archaeology and myth. This sleep-friendly history tale is designed to help you relax and unwind. If you enjoy quiet explorations like this, please consider subscribing, liking, and leaving a soft comment. Now, let your breathing slow, let the day fade away, and drift with us into the ancient world of the Sea Peoples.
In the quiet rhythm of distant waves, the story of the Sea Peoples begins. Long before their name carried fear, they were only rumors, small, drifting reports that spread along the Mediterranean's edges like soft echoes from far-off shores. Sailors returning to crowded ports spoke of unfamiliar ships seen at dawn, their silhouettes gliding across pale water. Fishermen whispered about figures standing on distant decks, watching the coastline with calm, unreadable intent. These early sightings were uncertain, easy to dismiss, but something about them lingered in people's conversations, something that felt different from ordinary travel. Across the great kingdoms of the age, life moved steadily. Fields were tended, trade routes bustled, and rulers trusted their walls and armies. The sea was familiar, a route for merchants, not a source of fear. Yet beneath its surface, quiet change was gathering. From Cyprus to the Aegean, from Canaan to the edges of Anatolia, small villages reported brief visits from strangers, people wearing unfamiliar clothing, carrying tools and weapons shaped differently from anything local craftsmen made. They stayed only long enough to rest, speaking little, leaving no clear answers behind. Their ships were unlike the vessels known in the region, long, low, and built for swift travel. Broad sails rose from them like pale wings. When several moved together, they seemed almost purposeful, like a single body drifting with united intent. Rumors began to grow. Some believed these visitors were displaced by storms or famine. Others imagined they were scouts for a wandering nation. A few wondered whether the sea itself had carried them from lands long forgotten. Small warnings appeared, villages missing stores of grain, coastal outposts abandoned, merchant routes suddenly quiet. Nothing yet felt like danger, but everything felt slightly changed, as though the world were shifting in the background. Rulers received scattered reports, but did not yet understand them. A governor spoke of ships lingering offshore. A merchant described being shadowed for hours. A lone sailor swore he saw distant fires on an island that did not appear on any map. Each story alone meant little. Together, they suggested a movement growing larger than anyone realized. As this first hour comes to a close, the ancient world remains unaware of what approaches. Winds shift softly. Waves rise and fall with steady breath. And far across the horizon, the Sea Peoples continue their silent, steady journey, unknown, unseen, and unstoppable. Their purpose is still hidden, their origins still a mystery, but their presence is already beginning to reshape the world.
As the sun rose over distant islands, the sea peoples moved quietly along the coasts, unseen by most of the great kingdoms. Their small groups had grown, merging with others who had also been displaced by famine, earthquakes, and the slow erosion of security. They were no longer just wandering families. They were becoming a traveling community, bound by survival and shared knowledge of the sea. Across the Mediterranean, life continued as usual. Egypt's fields thrived under the Nile's predictable floods. Hittite fortresses stood tall, and Mycenaean palaces echoed with activity. But in hidden bays and quiet coves, the sea peoples honed their skills. They practiced rowing together, learning the currents and testing the speed and durability of their boats. They taught one another which winds to follow, which stars to read, and how to remain unseen when they wished. The groups also shared tools, weapons, and simple strategies for defense. Families passed down practical knowledge, how to fish in deeper waters, how to track the movements of other travelers, how to read subtle signs in the land and sea. Children learned quietly, absorbing lessons that would shape the next generation. As they traveled from island to island, they occasionally observed the great kingdoms from a distance. Ships sailed to far ports. Cities bustled with trade. Walls and fortresses gleamed under the sun. But the sea peoples were careful. They had not yet become raiders. Their priority was survival, not conquest. They moved with patience, learning the patterns of powerful neighbors without drawing attention to themselves. Some small conflicts arose naturally, misunderstandings over food or trespassing on lands already claimed. These were minor, resolved quickly, but each encounter taught lessons about caution, strategy, and the strength of unity. Slowly they grew more organized. Groups began to move in larger flotillas, coordinating their movements across islands and coastlines. Their numbers increased steadily, yet they remained nimble, quiet, and watchful. Even as they gained strength, uncertainty lingered. Where could they go? Which lands would welcome them? Which kingdoms would resist? Every decision carried weight, for the world they traversed was not empty. It was filled with cities, soldiers, and people who had lived there for generations. By the end of this second hour, the sea peoples were no longer invisible shadows. They were travelers, survivors, and a growing force quietly gathering along the edges of the Mediterranean. They were still unknown to the kingdoms that would one day record their arrival. But the currents of change had begun. Every wave carried them closer to the shores where history would remember them, and every silent night strengthened their unity, their knowledge, and their resolve. The journey continues, carried softly over the sea, into the world that waits unknowingly for their presence.
The sea peoples had begun to move with increasing confidence. Their flotillas stretched across quiet bays and hidden coves, sometimes visible only as shadows against the morning sun. Each day they ventured further from familiar shores, learning the ways of the open sea and the currents that could carry them swiftly or trap them in unknown waters. They were no longer scattered families. Their communities had grown and leaders had emerged, not kings, but navigators and elders who guided the group with quiet authority. These guides taught others to read the stars, to anticipate weather patterns, and to move silently,
so that their presence remained unseen by the great kingdoms along the coasts. Along the way, they observed the wealth of the Bronze Age civilizations. Cities with massive walls rose above the rivers and harbors. Ships filled with grain, oil, copper, and treasures moved steadily between ports. Temples stood as symbols of power, their stones polished and decorated with carvings that told stories of kings and gods. Yet the sea peoples did not attack. They watched, learned, and prepared. Each observation taught them something about survival, strategy, and the human world they were slowly entering. Their boats became more sophisticated. Oars were fitted to allow faster, coordinated rowing. Sails were repaired with woven fibers and stitched hides. Simple fortifications were added to protect families on board, and small contingents practiced drills for both defense and movement. Even children participated, learning the rhythms of the sea and the quiet discipline required for long journeys. Not all encounters were peaceful. Occasionally, they came across other travelers, some fleeing disasters, others seeking trade. Misunderstandings sometimes led to skirmishes, but these conflicts were brief and resolved without lasting harm. Each encounter strengthened the group's cohesion, teaching lessons about negotiation, patience, and the need for careful planning. Despite their growing strength, uncertainty lingered. Which coast would welcome them? Which lands were dangerous? How would the kingdoms respond if they were noticed? These questions guided their movements, shaping every decision, every pause, and every silent night spent waiting in hidden coves. By the end of this third hour, the sea peoples were no longer mere rumors or distant shadows. They had become an emerging force, moving steadily across the Mediterranean, unseen yet purposeful. Their unity, resilience, and knowledge of the sea had grown, preparing them for the encounters that would soon bring them into the pages of history. The waves carried them quietly onward, each stroke of the oar a measure of survival, strategy, and an unknown destiny waiting just beyond the horizon.
The sea peoples had now traveled far from the islands and coastlines of their earlier journeys. Their flotillas stretched longer, families had grown closer through shared hardship, and leaders guided their movement with quiet certainty. Each day, they practiced rowing in unison, repairing vessels, and teaching younger members the subtle signs of the sea, how to anticipate sudden storms, how to read the wind, and how to sense the movements of other ships even before they appeared on the horizon. From a distance, they began to notice the civilizations they would one day impact. Cities rose along the coasts like clusters of stone and light. Temples reached toward the sky, and the smoke of hearths drifted softly over villages. Ships loaded with trade moved constantly between harbors, their sails catching the wind in predictable patterns. Yet the sea peoples did not yet confront these worlds. They watched quietly, noting strengths, weaknesses, and patterns. Observation had become a part of survival, and patience had become their ally. Along quieter shores, small settlements sometimes glimpsed their passing. Fishermen noticed unfamiliar vessels gliding silently over the water. Children pointed at strange figures on distant decks, wondering who they were and where they had come from. But these early encounters were brief and fleeting, leaving more questions than answers. The sea peoples moved quickly,
avoiding unnecessary contact and keeping their growing strength concealed. Within the communities themselves, life continued in quiet rhythm. Meals were shared with care, fires glowed each evening, and stories of past journeys were told softly, teaching lessons of caution, resilience, and the importance of unity. Children learned not only practical skills, how to fish, row, or repair sails, but also patience, observation, and the quiet understanding that the world they were entering could be both beautiful and dangerous. Small challenges still arose. Storms occasionally scattered parts of the flotilla. Illness swept through a group now and then. And yet each difficulty strengthened the bonds between families, warriors, and navigators. Every problem solved together was a lesson in trust and cooperation, preparing them for the greater trials that lay ahead. By the end of this fourth hour, the sea peoples were no longer just wanderers. They were becoming a coordinated, purposeful force, moving steadily across the Mediterranean, aware of the civilizations that surrounded them, but remaining hidden for now. Each day strengthened their unity, each night reinforced their resolve, and each wave carried them closer to the shores where history would eventually take notice of their arrival. The journey continues, quietly, steadily, and with a sense of purpose born from necessity, survival, and the unseen destiny that lay ahead.
The sea peoples had grown bolder, their movements more deliberate, yet they remained cautious. Their flotillas, now larger and more organized, moved along the Mediterranean's quieter shores, avoiding major ports but learning the ways of the inhabited coastlines. Observation had become second nature. Which villages produced the most food, which harbors were lightly guarded, and which waters allowed safe passage during storms. Life aboard the vessels was steady and quiet. Fires were lit at night for warmth and cooking, and elders shared lessons with the young about the stars, the wind, and the ocean's rhythm. Children listened carefully, absorbing knowledge that would shape their understanding of the sea and the world beyond their small communities. Every action, every observation, every story told in hushed tones was a preparation for the challenges yet to come. Occasionally, the sea peoples glimpsed the distant civilizations that would one day record their presence. From afar, they could see the walls of fortified cities, smoke rising from villages, and the orderly movement of trade ships. These glimpses were lessons in strategy, when to move, when to hide, and how to approach a coastline without drawing attention. Every observation strengthened their ability to survive and thrive in an unfamiliar world. Conflicts were still rare, but inevitable. Some smaller encounters with local fishermen or travelers led to brief misunderstandings. Yet these moments were handled swiftly, teaching the groups patience, negotiation, and the importance of unity. Each resolved tension reinforced the growing cohesion among the sea peoples, ensuring that they moved as one, while still respecting the individual families and clans within their flotilla. As the days passed, the sea people's knowledge of the sea deepened. They learned to read subtle changes in tides, to anticipate storms, and to navigate across waters that had once seemed limitless and intimidating. Their boats became more resilient, patched and reinforced with materials scavenged from forests, abandoned settlements, and previous voyages. Every repair, every lesson, every shared skill increased their resilience and confidence. By the close of this fifth hour, the sea peoples were no longer distant shadows. They were emerging as a purposeful force, skilled in navigation, careful in approach and increasingly aware of the civilizations they would eventually influence. They had learned the art of survival, the rhythm of the waves, and the quiet strength of unity. Their journey continued, carried forward gently by the currents, steadily approaching a world that had yet to understand the impact these travelers would leave upon history. The Sea Peoples had now traveled farther than ever before, their flotillas stretching across calm bays and hidden coves. They were no longer merely wandering families. They were a growing network of communities, bound by shared knowledge, trust, and the rhythm of the sea. Each day they practiced coordination, learned to repair and reinforce their boats, and quietly observed the lands and civilizations they approached. Small islands became places of rest, teaching grounds, and strategy. Here, elders instructed children in the art of navigation, reading the stars and anticipating storms. Warriors practiced silently, understanding that strength without caution could bring disaster. Every family, every individual contributed to the growing unity of the group. From these vantage points, the Sea Peoples studied the great kingdoms at a distance. Egypt's cities glimmered under the sun. The walls of Hittite fortresses rose like cliffs above the highlands. Mycenaean palaces gleamed with the wealth of trade and craftsmanship. Even without engaging, these observations taught valuable lessons: where the coastlines were weakest, how trade moved along the seas, and how communities defended themselves. Despite their growing skill and confidence, the Sea Peoples remained cautious. They avoided unnecessary contact with local villagers and trading ships, moving silently through nights and using fog or darkness for concealment. Each encounter, each observation was recorded in memory, forming the knowledge that would guide them in the years ahead. Life aboard their vessels maintained a quiet rhythm. Fires glowed softly in the evenings, meals were shared, and stories were passed down. These stories preserved lessons from past journeys, teaching the next generation the importance of patience, unity, and careful planning. Children listened closely, slowly learning that survival in this world depended on wisdom as much as strength. By the end of this 6th hour, the Sea Peoples had become skilled travelers, observers, and survivors. They had learned the subtle lessons of the sea, the strength of quiet coordination, and the importance of patience. Though they were still largely unknown to the great civilizations of the Mediterranean, the foundations for their future influence had been laid. Their journey continued onward, quietly moving toward the shores where history would one day take notice of them.
By now, the Sea Peoples had grown more confident in their movements along the Mediterranean. Their flotillas were well organized, and each family and group had a role to play. Some cared for the younger children, tending fires and cooking meals. Others repaired boats, sharpened tools, or quietly observed distant settlements. The elders guided them, teaching not only navigation, but also the lessons of patience and survival. The coastlines themselves became teachers. Hidden bays and quiet inlets revealed which shores were safe to approach and which were dangerous. Villages that seemed abandoned at a distance often had sharp-eyed watchers who could spot the approach of ships.
The sea peoples learned to read these signs carefully, moving with caution and avoiding unnecessary confrontation. From afar, they observed the great kingdoms. Egyptian ships carried grain along the Nile. Hittite armies trained behind high walls, and Mycenaean trade ships glided through Aegean waters. The sea peoples noted the patterns, strengths, and vulnerabilities of these civilizations, recording everything silently in memory. They were not yet raiders, they were learners, preparing for survival and understanding the world they were entering. Small encounters continued to teach lessons. Fishermen or wandering travelers sometimes saw them passing by, causing brief moments of tension or curiosity. These interactions were handled quietly, teaching diplomacy, discretion, and the importance of moving as one. Every resolved incident strengthened their cohesion, and every observation sharpened their understanding of human settlements. Life within the flotilla remained steady. Evenings were filled with soft conversations, the occasional song, and the sharing of stories from earlier journeys. Children absorbed these lessons naturally, learning the rhythms of the sea and the skills that would serve them as they grew older. Each family contributed to the growing unity of the group, creating a sense of shared purpose. By the end of this 7th hour, the sea peoples had become highly skilled travelers, moving quietly and purposefully along the Mediterranean coasts. They had learned the lessons of patience, observation, and coordination. Though the great civilizations remained unaware of their presence, the foundations for future encounters were being laid. Their journey continued onward, steady and deliberate, across waters that would one day record their arrival in the chronicles of history.
The sea peoples had now traveled for many moons, their movements growing more deliberate and coordinated. The flotillas were no longer simple collections of families. They had become communities, united by shared experience, knowledge, and a deep understanding of the sea. Every day brought new lessons: how to read subtle shifts in the wind, which currents carried ships safely, and how to approach unknown coasts without drawing attention. Islands and hidden bays served as practice grounds and resting points. Here, the elders instructed children in the arts of navigation, fishing, and observation, while adults reinforced boats, repaired sails, and shared strategies for survival. Even small missteps were turned into lessons, shaping the group's growing discipline and quiet strength. From afar, the sea peoples observed civilizations with care. Egyptian cities shimmered in the sun, their temples reaching skyward. Hittite fortresses lined the Anatolian hills, strong and imposing. Mycenaean palaces gleamed with the wealth of trade. But the sea peoples moved cautiously, learning from what they saw and avoiding direct confrontation. Knowledge was more valuable than conflict. Patience was more powerful than force. Encounters with local villagers or travelers were brief but instructive. Misunderstandings were resolved with care, teaching diplomacy, strategy, and the importance of maintaining unity. Each experience strengthened bonds among families, warriors, and navigators alike. Every shared lesson increased their confidence and resilience. Life aboard the vessels remained calm and steady. Evening fires glowed softly, meals were prepared and shared, and quiet stories of past journeys were passed down. Children learned not only practical skills, but also the subtle art of reading the world, learning to see signs others might overlook, to anticipate dangers, and to move with care and purpose. By the close of this 8th hour, the Sea Peoples were no longer distant wanderers. They had become a coordinated, disciplined force, moving steadily across the Mediterranean, quietly gaining knowledge and experience. The civilizations they approached remained unaware, but the seeds of their future impact were already growing. Their journey continued, carried by the gentle rhythm of the waves, toward a destiny that history would one day record.
As the Sea Peoples traveled further along the Mediterranean, their movements became more confident. Their flotillas, now larger and more cohesive, navigated the waters with skill and care. Each day brought lessons in patience and strategy, teaching them to read the currents, anticipate storms, and move quietly past settlements without drawing notice. Islands and hidden coves continued to serve as resting points. Here, families shared quiet meals, repaired boats, and practiced rowing in unison. Children learned the arts of navigation and observation, while adults reinforced their vessels and shared knowledge gained from previous journeys. Every task, no matter how small, contributed to the growing strength of the group. From a distance, the civilizations of the Bronze Age were observed carefully. Egyptian cities along the Nile shone under the sun. Hittite fortresses rose strong on high cliffs, and Mycenaean palaces glittered with wealth. The Sea Peoples watched without interfering, learning patterns of trade, defense, and human behavior. Observation was more important than confrontation. Knowledge would ensure survival far more than force alone. Brief encounters with local villagers or travelers occurred occasionally. These interactions were handled with care, teaching lessons in diplomacy, discretion, and group cohesion. Even minor misunderstandings became valuable experiences, helping the Sea Peoples move more strategically and with unity. Life aboard their vessels continued in a calm, steady rhythm. Fires glowed softly in the evenings. Stories were shared, and lessons were passed quietly from elders to children. Each member contributed to the strength and discipline of the community, ensuring that the flotilla moved as one, silently and purposefully. By the end of this 9th hour, the Sea Peoples had become skilled, cautious travelers, quietly preparing for a future that would soon place them in the attention of powerful civilizations. Their journey carried on steadily, guided by the waves, the stars, and the quiet understanding that their presence would one day reshape the shores they approached. The Sea Peoples had now traveled farther than ever before, moving along coasts and across islands with quiet precision. Their flotillas were organized and disciplined, yet they remained cautious, aware that the civilizations of the Mediterranean were strong and well defended. Every journey brought lessons. which bays were safest, how to navigate unfamiliar waters, and how to avoid detection by those who might view them with suspicion. Life aboard the vessels continued steadily. Families prepared meals together, repaired boats, and tended fires in the evenings. Elders passed on knowledge about the stars, the wind, and the rhythms of the sea. Children learned not only practical skills like rowing and fishing, but also observation, patience, and the quiet awareness that would serve them in the world ahead. From afar, they watched the great kingdoms. Egyptian cities along the Nile glimmered in the sun, their walls tall and formidable. Hittite fortresses rose on Anatolian cliffs, strong and imposing. Mycenaean palaces gleamed with wealth, their harbors full of trade ships. The sea peoples moved silently, learning from every glimpse, every pattern, and every sign, knowing that knowledge was more powerful than confrontation at this stage. Occasional encounters with locals or travelers were brief and instructive. Misunderstandings or small conflicts taught lessons in diplomacy, coordination, and caution. Each resolved incident strengthened the bonds within the flotilla and added to their growing understanding of the human world. By the end of this 10th hour, the sea peoples were no longer unseen wanderers. They were a cohesive, skilled, and purposeful community, moving steadily through the Mediterranean, quietly observing, learning, and preparing for the encounters that would one day record their presence in history. Their journey continued, carried forward by the waves, guided by the stars, and strengthened by the unity of their people.
The sea peoples had traveled long and far, their flotillas moving steadily along the Mediterranean's quieter shores. They had grown skilled at reading the sea, understanding the winds and navigating by the stars. Each movement was deliberate, each choice made with care, as the people prepared for the unknown challenges that lay ahead. Life aboard the vessels remained calm and rhythmic. Families shared meals, repaired boats, and tended small fires in the evenings. Elders passed stories of past journeys and practical lessons about survival, while children absorbed these teachings quietly, learning the subtle arts of observation, patience, and adaptability. Every day strengthened the bonds within the group, creating a sense of unity and purpose. From afar, they observed the civilizations they approached. Egypt's cities glimmered with activity along the Nile. Hittite fortresses stood as silent sentinels in the Anatolian highlands, and Mycenaean palaces glimmered in the sun. The sea peoples watched without interfering, taking note of patterns in trade, defense, and human behavior. Knowledge, they had learned, was more valuable than confrontation. Encounters with locals were still rare but meaningful. Travelers or fishermen occasionally glimpsed their ships, prompting careful interaction or avoidance. These moments taught lessons in negotiation, discretion, and coordination, helping the sea peoples refine their skills in moving undetected and maintaining cohesion. By the end of this 11th hour,
the sea peoples had become a highly skilled, quiet force. They were adept observers, careful planners, and patient travelers. Though largely unknown to the civilizations around them, their presence was growing stronger with each day. The flotillas continued forward, guided by the steady rhythm of the waves, toward the shores where history would one day take notice of their arrival.
By this point, the Sea Peoples had traveled for many moons, their flotillas stretching across islands and quiet coasts. Their movement was deliberate, guided by careful observation and the collective wisdom of the elders. Every day brought new lessons about the sea, the currents, and the lands they approached. They learned which bays offered safety, which coasts were lightly watched, and which areas could provide resources for rest and repair. Life aboard the vessels followed a steady, calming rhythm. Families prepared meals together, mended sails, and tended small evening fires. Elders shared lessons in navigation, survival, and the subtle cues of nature, while children quietly absorbed the knowledge that would prepare them for the journeys ahead. Every action strengthened the unity and resilience of the group, fostering a quiet sense of purpose and cooperation. From a distance, they observed the great civilizations of the Bronze Age. Egyptian cities shone along the Nile. Hittite fortresses loomed across Anatolian hills, and Mycenaean palaces sparkled in the sun. The Sea Peoples studied patterns of movement, trade, and defense, learning the rhythms of human life. Observation was their most important tool, teaching patience and caution more than confrontation ever could. Occasional encounters with villagers or traveling merchants occurred, brief but instructive. Misunderstandings and small conflicts were resolved carefully, strengthening cohesion and honing negotiation skills. Each experience reinforced their ability to move quietly, coordinate effectively, and avoid unnecessary danger. By the end of this 12th hour, the Sea Peoples had become highly disciplined travelers, quietly gathering knowledge and experience. Their flotillas were stronger, their communities closer, and their awareness of the civilizations around them greater than ever. The journey continued, carried softly over the waves, toward the shores where history would eventually record their presence and the mysteries that would follow them for centuries.
The Sea Peoples had now traveled far along the Mediterranean, their flotillas moving with a quiet, steady rhythm. Their journeys were no longer simply for survival. They were learning, adapting, and becoming more aware of the world around them. Each day brought new lessons: how to navigate by subtle changes in the wind, how to approach unfamiliar shores safely, and how to observe without being noticed. Life aboard the vessels remained calm and orderly. Families shared meals, repaired sails, and tended fires at night. Elders told stories of past journeys, passing down lessons of patience, coordination, and survival. Children absorbed these stories, quietly learning the skills and knowledge that would serve them in the years to come. Every member of the flotilla contributed to its cohesion, forming a strong, unified community. From afar, they continued to watch the great civilizations. Egyptian cities along the Nile shimmered in sunlight. Hittite fortresses loomed like silent guardians on Anatolian hills, and Mycenaean palaces sparkled with wealth and trade. The sea peoples studied patterns of human life, noting where defenses were weak, where trade was abundant, and how populations moved and interacted. They were observers first, learning from every detail. Occasional encounters with locals or travelers offered practical lessons. Brief misunderstandings, minor conflicts, and moments of curiosity were all handled with care, teaching diplomacy, strategy, and caution. Each experience strengthened the flotilla's unity and reinforced the importance of careful planning. By the end of this 13th hour, the sea peoples were skilled travelers, quiet observers, and patient learners. Their flotillas moved steadily across the Mediterranean, growing stronger and wiser with every day. Though the civilizations around them remained largely unaware, the foundations for future encounters were being laid, and their journey continued quietly over the waves, toward the shores where history would one day take notice.
The sea peoples had now traveled for many months, their flotillas moving with steady purpose across islands and quiet coastlines. They had become highly skilled at reading the rhythms of the sea, how the wind shifted, how currents carried them, and how storms approached from far beyond the horizon. Each day offered new lessons, and the group grew more united, stronger and wiser with every passing journey. Life aboard the vessels remained calm and orderly. Families shared meals, tended fires in the evenings, and repaired boats as needed. Elders passed down knowledge in quiet, patient tones, teaching children how to navigate, fish, and observe the world around them. The younger members absorbed these lessons naturally, their minds attuned to the patterns of the sea and the subtle signs of danger or opportunity. From a distance, they observed the great kingdoms of the Mediterranean. Egyptian cities stretched along the Nile, full of life and trade. Hittite fortresses stood on high cliffs, their walls solid and imposing. Mycenaean palaces gleamed in the sunlight, their harbors alive with ships carrying goods across the waters. The sea peoples did not interfere. They learned instead, noting patterns, weaknesses, and possibilities for the future. Encounters with locals remained infrequent but instructive. Fishermen, merchants, or travelers sometimes glimpsed the flotillas, prompting brief interactions or cautious avoidance. Each situation offered lessons in diplomacy, coordination, and subtle strategy. The community's cohesion grew stronger with every resolved incident, reinforcing the importance of patience and unity. By the end of this 14th hour, the sea peoples had become experienced travelers and careful observers. Their flotillas moved with purpose and quiet confidence, growing stronger, more knowledgeable, and better prepared for the encounters that lay ahead. The journey continued, carried gently on the waves, toward the shores where history would eventually record their presence and the mysteries they would leave behind. The sea peoples had now traveled for many moons, their flotillas stretching across quiet bays and hidden coasts. Their movements were deliberate, their skills sharpened by experience, and their knowledge of the sea growing with every journey. Each day brought lessons in navigation, observation, and coordination, strengthening the community and preparing them for the challenges ahead. Life aboard the vessels remained calm and steady. Families shared meals, repaired boats, and tended evening fires. Elders passed down stories and practical knowledge: how to read the stars, anticipate storms, and move silently. Children absorbed these lessons naturally, learning patience, observation, and the importance of working together. Each member contributed to the unity and resilience of the flotilla. From afar, the sea peoples watched civilizations without interfering. Egyptian cities glimmered along the Nile, Hittite fortresses rose strong on Anatolian hills, and Mycenaean palaces sparkled with wealth and trade. Every observation taught them about the patterns of human life, the flow of commerce, and the strengths and vulnerabilities of the kingdoms they would one day encounter. Encounters with locals were rare but meaningful. Fishermen or travelers sometimes glimpsed the flotillas, and brief interactions taught lessons in diplomacy, caution, and coordination. These moments reinforced the community's cohesion and strengthened their ability to move as one. By the end of this 15th hour, the sea peoples were no longer distant wanderers. They were skilled navigators, quiet observers, and patient travelers. Their flotillas moved steadily across the Mediterranean, carrying them closer to the shores where history would eventually notice them. Each wave carried them forward, and with it the silent promise of the impact they would one day leave upon the world. The sea peoples had now journeyed across much of the Mediterranean, their flotillas moving with quiet confidence. Every day offered lessons: how to read subtle changes in wind and tide, how to navigate unfamiliar waters, and how to move past settlements without being seen. The community had grown stronger, more disciplined, and more aware of the civilizations that lay along the coasts. Life aboard the vessels was steady and calming. Families shared meals, repaired sails, and tended fires as evening fell. Elders told stories of past journeys, teaching lessons in patience, observation, and survival. Children listened quietly, absorbing knowledge that would guide them for years to come. Every member contributed to the cohesion and resilience of the flotilla, ensuring it moved as one. From a distance, they observed the kingdoms of the Bronze Age. Egyptian cities shone along the Nile, their walls tall and guarded. Hittite fortresses rose on Anatolian hills, strong and imposing. Mycenaean palaces gleamed in sunlight, their harbors full of trade and activity. The sea peoples studied carefully, noting patterns, strengths, and vulnerabilities, understanding that knowledge was their most powerful tool. Occasional encounters with locals or travelers provided lessons in diplomacy, discretion, and coordination. Even brief misunderstandings reinforced their unity and helped them move more strategically. Every experience strengthened their ability to act quietly, thoughtfully, and with purpose. By the end of this 16th hour, the sea peoples had become highly skilled, patient travelers. They moved steadily across the Mediterranean, observing, learning, and growing stronger with each passing day. Though the kingdoms around them remained largely unaware, the sea peoples were quietly preparing for the future. Carried onward
by the waves toward the shores where history would one day take notice of them.
The sea peoples had now traveled far along the Mediterranean, their flotillas moving with quiet determination. Every day offered lessons in navigation, observation, and patience. The community had grown stronger, more organized, and more attuned to the subtle rhythms of the sea. Each movement, each pause, and each careful choice reflected their growing experience and understanding of the world around them. Life aboard the vessels continued with calm routine. Families shared meals, repaired sails, and tended small fires in the evenings. Elders passed down stories of past journeys, teaching children the arts of observation, navigation, and survival. Young members absorbed these lessons naturally, learning how to anticipate danger, read the wind, and move quietly. Every action strengthened the unity and resilience of the flotilla. From a distance, the great civilizations continued to be observed. Egyptian cities along the Nile gleamed in the sunlight. Hittite fortresses stood tall on high cliffs, and Mycenaean palaces sparkled with wealth and activity. The sea peoples watched carefully, noting patterns of trade, defense, and human behavior. Observation remained their greatest tool, teaching patience, strategy, and foresight. Encounters with local villagers or travelers were rare but instructive. Brief misunderstandings or cautious interactions taught diplomacy, careful planning, and coordination. Each experience reinforced the cohesion of the community, ensuring that the flotilla could move as a single, united force when the time came. By the end of this 17th hour, the sea peoples were no longer distant wanderers. They had become patient, skilled travelers, and careful observers, quietly moving through the Mediterranean and gathering the knowledge that would sustain them. Their journey continued gently, carried by the rhythm of the waves, toward the shores where history would one day record their presence and the mystery that surrounded them.
The sea peoples had traveled far and long, their flotillas now moving with quiet confidence. Each day brought lessons in navigation, observation, and patience. The communities aboard the vessels had grown stronger, more organized, and more aware of the world around them. Every decision was deliberate, every movement calculated, as they continued their careful journey across the Mediterranean. Life on board remained steady and serene. Families shared meals, repaired sails, and tended small fires at night. Elders passed down stories and knowledge, teaching children how to read the stars, anticipate weather, and move quietly along unfamiliar shores. The younger generation absorbed these lessons with patience, learning the subtle skills needed to survive and thrive. Every action strengthened the unity and resilience of the flotilla. From afar, the sea peoples continued to watch civilizations without interference. Egyptian cities shimmered along the Nile. Hittite fortresses rose strong on Anatolian hills, and Mycenaean palaces gleamed in the sunlight. Every observation revealed lessons. Which routes were safest, where trade flowed most freely, and which settlements were lightly defended. Knowledge remained their most important weapon, far more than any sword or spear. Occasional encounters with local villagers or travelers provided practical lessons.
Brief misunderstandings or cautious meetings taught diplomacy, strategy, and coordination. These experiences reinforced cohesion and ensured the flotilla could move quietly and efficiently as one unified group. By the end of this 18th hour, the Sea Peoples had become skilled, patient, and observant travelers. Their flotillas moved steadily across the Mediterranean, quietly gaining strength, knowledge, and confidence. Though largely unnoticed by the great kingdoms around them, their journey pressed forward, carried gently by the waves, toward the shores where history would one day remember their arrival and the enduring mystery they left behind.
The Sea Peoples had now traveled extensively across the Mediterranean, their flotillas moving with quiet purpose and growing confidence. Each day brought lessons in the rhythm of the sea, the patterns of the winds, and the subtle signs of approaching danger. The community aboard the vessels had grown stronger, disciplined, and highly aware of the civilizations along the coasts. Life aboard remained calm and orderly. Families shared meals, repaired sails, and tended evening fires. Elders quietly passed down lessons on navigation, survival, and observation, while children absorbed these teachings naturally, learning to anticipate challenges and move with patience. Every task, every observation, and every story strengthened the bonds within the flotilla. From afar, they observed the great kingdoms without interference. Egyptian cities along the Nile shimmered with life. Hittite fortresses stood tall and formidable, and Mycenaean palaces gleamed in sunlight, their harbors busy with trade. Every detail was noted: how settlements were defended, where trade flowed freely, and where coasts were lightly watched. Knowledge remained their most powerful tool. Occasional encounters with villagers or travelers provided practical lessons. Brief misunderstandings or cautious exchanges reinforced the importance of discretion, strategy, and coordination. Each experience strengthened unity and prepared the community for the challenges yet to come. By the end of this 19th hour, the Sea Peoples were no longer unseen wanderers. They were patient, skilled travelers, quiet observers, and a cohesive community. Their flotillas moved steadily across the Mediterranean, quietly growing stronger and wiser, carried by the rhythm of the waves toward the shores where history would one day record their presence and the mystery that surrounded them.
The Sea Peoples had now traveled across vast stretches of the Mediterranean. Their flotillas moved with quiet confidence, guided by knowledge, patience, and experience gained from countless days at sea. Each member of the community had a role. Some repaired boats, others prepared meals, while elders and navigators quietly guided the movements of the flotilla. Life aboard the vessels remained serene. Evening fires glowed softly, stories were told, and lessons from previous journeys were shared. Children absorbed knowledge from their elders, learning how to read the stars, the wind, and the subtle signs of distant shores. Every action reinforced the unity, discipline, and resilience of the community. From a distance, they observed the civilizations of the Bronze Age. Egyptian cities along the Nile glimmered. Hittite fortresses loomed on high hills, and Mycenaean palaces shone with wealth and activity. The Sea Peoples continued to watch quietly, learning about trade patterns, defenses, and human behavior. Observation, patience, and careful planning remained their greatest strength. Brief encounters with local fishermen or travelers provided small but valuable lessons. Misunderstandings or cautious exchanges taught the importance of diplomacy, coordination, and maintaining cohesion. Each experience reinforced the flotilla's ability to move as a single, unified community. By the end of this 20th hour, the Sea Peoples were skilled navigators, quiet observers, and disciplined travelers. Their journey had strengthened their unity, knowledge, and confidence.
Though the great kingdoms still largely remained unaware, the sea peoples pressed onward, carried by the gentle rhythm of the waves, slowly approaching the shores where history would one day take notice of them and remember the mystery they carried. The sea peoples had now traveled across vast stretches of the Mediterranean. Their flotillas moved with quiet confidence, guided by knowledge, patience, and experience gained from countless days at sea. Each member of the community had a role. Some repaired boats, others prepared meals, while elders and navigators quietly guided the movements of the flotilla. Life aboard the vessels remained serene. Evening fires glowed softly. Stories were told, and lessons from previous journeys were shared. Children absorbed knowledge from their elders, learning how to read the stars, the wind, and the subtle signs of distant shores. Every action reinforced the unity, discipline, and resilience of the community. From a distance, they observed the civilizations of the Bronze Age. Egyptian cities along the Nile glimmered. Hittite fortresses loomed on high hills, and Mycenaean palaces shone with wealth and activity. The sea peoples continued to watch quietly, learning about trade patterns, defenses, and human behavior. Observation, patience, and careful planning remained their greatest strengths. Brief encounters with local fishermen or travelers provided small but valuable lessons. Misunderstandings or cautious exchanges taught the importance of diplomacy, coordination, and maintaining cohesion. Each experience reinforced the flotilla's ability to move as a single, unified community. By the end of this 20th hour, the sea peoples were skilled navigators, quiet observers, and disciplined travelers. Their journey had strengthened their unity, knowledge, and confidence. Though the great kingdom still largely remained unaware, the sea peoples pressed onward, carried by the gentle rhythm of the waves, slowly approaching the shores where history would one day take notice of them and remember the mystery they carried. The sea peoples moved steadily along the Mediterranean, their flotillas blending with the rhythm of the waves. Every day brought new knowledge. Which bays offered safety, how to read subtle changes in the wind, and which coasts were lightly watched. Each journey strengthened their unity, discipline, and ability to survive in a world largely unaware of their presence. Life aboard remained quiet and orderly. Families prepared meals together, repaired boats, and tended small evening fires. Elders passed down wisdom about navigation, survival, and reading the world. Children absorbed these lessons naturally, learning patience, observation, and the subtle art of moving without drawing attention. Every act reinforced the cohesion of the community and the strength of the flotilla. From a distance, they continued to observe the civilizations around them. Egyptian cities along the Nile shone in the sunlight. Hittite fortresses stood firm on high cliffs, and Mycenaean palaces glittered in the harbors. The sea people studied the patterns of trade, defense, and daily life, understanding that knowledge and patience were more powerful than confrontation. Occasional encounters with locals provided practical lessons. Fishermen or travelers sometimes glimpsed their vessels, and even brief interactions taught diplomacy, coordination, and the importance of moving together as a single unified group.
These experiences strengthened their discipline and refined their strategies. By the end of this 22nd hour, the Sea Peoples were skilled observers, patient travelers, and highly disciplined navigators. Their flotillas moved quietly across the Mediterranean, growing stronger and wiser with each day. Though the kingdoms around them remained largely unaware, the Sea Peoples were steadily approaching the shores where their presence would one day leave a lasting mark, and the mystery of their origins continued to deepen. The Sea Peoples had now traveled far along the Mediterranean, moving closer to coasts that were slowly becoming more familiar. Their flotillas moved with quiet purpose, guided by experience and the careful observations they had gathered over many moons. Each day strengthened their knowledge of currents, winds, and the habits of distant civilizations, preparing them for the encounters that would one day define their presence. Life aboard the vessels remained steady and calm. Families shared meals, repaired sails, and tended evening fires. Elders quietly imparted wisdom about survival, navigation, and observation, while children absorbed lessons naturally, learning to anticipate danger and move with care. Every task contributed to the unity and resilience of the community, reinforcing their ability to act as one. From a distance, the Sea Peoples observed the great civilizations with patient eyes. Egyptian cities along the Nile glimmered under the sun. Hittite fortresses stood tall and imposing on rocky hills, and Mycenaean palaces sparkled with trade and wealth. They studied patterns of life, defense, and commerce, understanding that their greatest strength lay in knowledge, patience, and strategy. Brief encounters with locals, though infrequent, were instructive. Fishermen or travelers occasionally glimpsed their vessels, and even minor interactions taught diplomacy, coordination, and subtlety. Each experience strengthened the cohesion of the flotilla, ensuring they could move silently and purposefully when the time came. By the end of this 23rd hour, the Sea Peoples were no longer distant wanderers. They were a disciplined, skilled, and observant community, moving steadily across the Mediterranean. Their journey continued, carried by the gentle rhythm of the waves, toward shores where history would one day take notice of their presence, and where the mysteries of their origins would remain etched in time. The Sea Peoples had now sailed for many moons, moving steadily along coastlines that were gradually becoming familiar. Their flotillas were highly organized, every member aware of their role and responsibilities. They had grown skilled at reading the sea, understanding the winds, and predicting changes in weather, all while moving quietly to avoid notice from the civilizations they observed. Life aboard remained calm and orderly. Families shared meals, repaired sails, and tended evening fires. Elders imparted lessons on navigation, survival, and careful observation, while children absorbed these teachings quietly, learning patience, awareness, and subtlety. Each task and story reinforced the unity and resilience of the community. From a distance, they watched civilizations continue their daily rhythms. Egyptian cities along the Nile glimmered with life and activity. Hittite fortresses rose solid and imposing on rocky hills, and Mycenaean palaces sparkled with trade and wealth. Every observation revealed patterns of defense, commerce,
and human behavior, emphasizing that knowledge and patience were their greatest strengths. Small encounters with locals or travelers were rare but instructive. Brief misunderstandings or cautious interactions taught diplomacy, coordination, and strategic movement. Each experience strengthened their cohesion and ensured that the flotilla could continue moving as a single unified group. By the end of this 24th hour, the Sea Peoples were highly skilled, disciplined, and patient travelers. Their flotillas moved steadily across the Mediterranean, growing stronger and wiser with every passing day. Though largely unseen, they were approaching shores where history would one day record their presence, and the mystery of who they were and where they had come from continued to grow.
The Sea Peoples had now approached regions where civilizations grew denser and the waters were busier with trade and travel. Their flotillas moved with quiet precision, aware that every glance from the shore might reveal them. Yet their skills in navigation, observation, and coordination had grown, allowing them to move confidently while remaining largely unseen. Life aboard the vessels continued with calm routine. Families shared meals, repaired boats, and tended evening fires. Elders passed down stories and practical lessons about survival, reading the waves, and understanding the patterns of human settlements. Children listened attentively, learning to interpret subtle signs and move cautiously. Each action strengthened the bonds within the flotilla, reinforcing discipline and unity. From a distance, the Sea Peoples observed the great kingdoms. Egyptian cities along the Nile glimmered in sunlight. Hittite fortresses rose strong and imposing, and Mycenaean palaces sparkled with trade and wealth. Every detail they noted, the flow of goods, the movement of soldiers, and the rhythm of daily life added to their understanding of the lands they were approaching. Encounters with locals remained brief and rare, but provided valuable lessons. Fishermen, travelers, or traders sometimes caught glimpses of their vessels. Each small interaction taught diplomacy, coordination, and careful timing, further strengthening the flotilla's cohesion and readiness for the challenges ahead. By the end of this 25th hour, the Sea Peoples had become patient, skilled, and highly disciplined travelers. Their flotillas moved steadily across the Mediterranean, quietly gaining strength and knowledge. Though largely unnoticed by the civilizations around them, they were approaching shores where history would eventually take notice, and the mystery of their origins and movements continued to grow. The Sea Peoples now sailed along coasts where the presence of cities and fortresses became more frequent. Their flotillas moved quietly, guided by skill, experience, and the careful observations they had gathered over countless days at sea. Each wave carried them forward, each breeze taught a new lesson, and each distant shore offered insight into the world they were slowly approaching. Life aboard remained calm and measured. Families shared meals, repaired sails, and tended evening fires. Elders imparted quiet lessons about survival, navigation, and the subtle signs of danger, while children absorbed this knowledge with patience and curiosity. Every task, every story, and every observation strengthened the unity and discipline of the flotilla. From afar, they watched civilizations with growing understanding. Egyptian cities glimmered along the Nile. Hittite fortresses stood firmly on rocky cliffs, and Mycenaean palaces shimmered in the sun. Every detail, the patterns of trade, the flow of people, and the defenses of settlements was studied and remembered. Knowledge, they knew, would be their most valuable asset. Occasional encounters with fishermen, merchants, or travelers were brief but instructive. Misunderstandings or cautious interactions taught diplomacy, careful timing, and coordination. These small experiences reinforced the cohesion of the flotilla and prepared them for the more significant challenges that lay ahead. By the end of this 26th hour, the Sea Peoples were patient, skilled, and disciplined travelers. Their flotillas moved steadily and silently, gaining strength, experience, and knowledge. Though the kingdoms along the Mediterranean remained largely unaware, the Sea Peoples approached the shores where history would one day record their presence, and the mystery of who they were and where they came from remained intact.
The Sea Peoples had now reached stretches of the Mediterranean where coasts were dotted with settlements and watchful eyes. Their flotillas moved quietly, each member aware of the importance of discretion and coordination. Every movement was deliberate, every pause purposeful, as they continued their careful journey along these increasingly populated shores. Life aboard the vessels remained calm and steady. Families shared meals, repaired boats, and tended small evening fires. Elders passed on lessons about reading the winds, observing the waters, and understanding the rhythms of human settlements. Children absorbed these teachings, learning to anticipate danger, move quietly, and act in harmony with the group. Every action reinforced the unity and resilience of the flotilla. From a distance, they continued to study the civilizations around them. Egyptian cities along the Nile shimmered with life. Hittite fortresses rose on rocky hills, and Mycenaean palaces glimmered in the sunlight. Every observation, the movement of trade, the flow of soldiers, the timing of daily routines was recorded in memory, creating a growing understanding of the lands they were approaching. Encounters with locals remained rare but meaningful. Fishermen, merchants, or travelers sometimes glimpsed their flotillas. Each interaction, however brief, taught lessons in diplomacy, strategy, and coordination. These experiences strengthened cohesion and ensured the Sea Peoples could continue moving as a single united community. By the end of this 27th hour, the Sea Peoples were patient, disciplined, and skilled travelers. Their flotillas moved steadily, silently, and purposefully across the Mediterranean, quietly growing stronger and wiser. The civilizations around them remained largely unaware, but the Sea Peoples continued toward the shores where history would eventually note their presence, and the enduring mystery of their origins continued to unfold.
The Sea Peoples had now sailed along coastlines increasingly rich with settlements and trade. Their flotillas moved with careful precision, their experience and unity allowing them to navigate past bustling ports and fortified towns without drawing attention. Every day brought new lessons in observation, strategy, and patience, strengthening the community aboard each vessel. Life on board remained steady and serene. Families shared meals, repaired sails, and tended evening fires. Elders quietly passed down knowledge about navigation, survival, and the subtle signs of human activity, while children absorbed these teachings, learning to anticipate danger, move carefully, and act in harmony with the group. Each day reinforced the cohesion and resilience of the flotilla. From a distance, the civilizations of the Bronze Age continued to be observed. Egyptian cities along the Nile gleamed with activity. Hittite fortresses rose high and imposing, and Mycenaean palaces sparkled in the sunlight. The sea peoples took note of trade routes, the strength of defenses, and the patterns of daily life. Knowledge remained their greatest tool, and patience their strongest ally. Occasional encounters with fishermen, merchants, or travelers were brief but instructive. Even minor interactions taught lessons in diplomacy, careful timing, and coordination. Each experience strengthened the community and reinforced their ability to move as a unified, disciplined flotilla. By the end of this 28th hour, the sea peoples were patient, skilled, and watchful travelers. Their flotillas moved quietly across the Mediterranean, steadily gaining knowledge, experience, and strength. Though the civilizations around them remained largely unaware, the sea peoples continued toward shores where their presence would one day be recorded, and the mystery of their origins remained deeply preserved.
The sea peoples had now sailed along coasts that were familiar, yet still distant enough to allow careful observation. Their flotillas moved silently, every member aware of the importance of discretion and coordination. The people aboard had grown stronger, more disciplined, and highly skilled at reading the rhythms of the sea and the behavior of the civilizations they approached. Life aboard remained calm and orderly. Families shared meals, repaired boats, and tended evening fires. Elders passed down stories and practical knowledge about survival, navigation, and the subtle signs of human activity. Every task and story reinforced the unity and resilience of the flotilla. From afar, they observed Egyptian cities along the Nile, Hittite fortresses on rocky hills, and Mycenaean palaces bustling with trade. Every detail, the flow of goods, the defenses of settlements, and the patterns of daily life was remembered. Observation and patience were their most valuable tools, preparing them for any future encounters. Encounters with locals, though infrequent, were instructive. Fishermen or travelers sometimes glimpsed their vessels, and brief exchanges taught lessons in diplomacy, coordination, and strategy. These small experiences strengthened the cohesion of the flotilla and refined their ability to move as a single, unified community. By the end of this 29th hour, the sea peoples were patient, disciplined, and highly skilled travelers. Their flotillas moved quietly across the Mediterranean, steadily approaching the shores where history would one day take notice. Their journey continued, carried by the rhythm of the waves, and the mystery of their origins remained intact, ready to leave a mark on the lands they would soon touch. The sea peoples had now reached the edges of the Mediterranean civilizations they had quietly observed for so long. Their flotillas moved with silent precision, every member aware of the delicate balance between presence and discretion. The communities aboard the vessels had grown strong, skilled, and unified, ready for the encounters that the coasts ahead might bring. Life aboard remained calm and measured. Families shared meals, repaired boats, and tended evening fires.
Elders imparted the final lessons about reading the stars, the signs of the wind, and the subtleties of human settlements. Children absorbed these teachings quietly, learning patience, observation, and harmony with the natural world. Each day had strengthened their discipline, unity, and awareness. From a distance, the Sea Peoples watched Egyptian cities shimmer along the Nile. Hittite fortresses stand tall upon cliffs, and Mycenaean palaces bustle with trade. Every observation had been stored, every pattern remembered, every subtle detail studied. They had learned the rhythms of human life, the strengths and vulnerabilities of civilizations, and the quiet power of patience. Although history would later record only glimpses of them, the Sea Peoples left a subtle mark on the world. Their origins remained mysterious, their movements enigmatic, and their story whispered across the ages. They were travelers, observers, and survivors, moving quietly through time and leaving behind questions that historians and storytellers would ponder for centuries. By the end of this 30th hour, the Sea Peoples had completed their long journey across the Mediterranean. Their flotillas rested along the shores, carrying with them knowledge, strength, and the mystery of who they were, where they came from, and why they vanished. And so their story continued in whispers, waves, and the silent memory of the sea itself.